Okay, in 6.4, we're learning how to multiply integers. So we're on page 272 in our books, page 272. Now, when we were adding and subtracting integers, we went by the rule, same sign, add and keep, different sign, subtract and take. Now, those rules only apply to adding and subtracting integers. For multiplying and dividing integers, you have these rules. An even number, so even is the key word here, an even number of negative signs, is a positive product. An odd number of negative signs will give me a negative product or a negative answer. Now, we're going to go into more detail on this, so if you're like, what in the world does that mean? That's okay. We're going to go over some examples. All right, so let's do a few examples real quick or just a few problems, and let's figure out if we're going to have a positive or a negative answer. If I had negative 8 times negative 2 times 1. Based on the rules that we just talked about, let's count how many negative signs we have. How many negative signs do we have? 2. Is 2 even or odd? It's even, so my answer would be positive. What if you had negative 1 times negative 1 times negative 1 times negative 1 times negative 1? Would your answer be positive or negative?
Negative.
Negative. Why?
Because there's 5.
Because there are 5 negatives, and 5 is an odd number. All right, so this is a different set of rules than adding and subtracting. We're counting before we even multiply. We're counting how many negatives we have in the expression. If it's an even number, my answer is positive. If it's an odd number, my answer is negative. And then I multiply. All right? So in example 1, the first question I ask myself is, how many negatives are in this expression? How many negatives? 2. So is my answer positive or negative? Positive what? Positive 35. Okay? How many negatives in example B? 1. So is my answer positive or negative? Negative what? 16. All right, now anytime I multiply a number by 0, what's the answer? The answer will be 0. Okay, so it doesn't matter if it's a negative or a positive, it doesn't matter. If you're multiplying it by 0, the answer is going to be 0. All right, and then what about D? 4 times negative 6, will my answer be positive or negative? Negative what? 24. Okay? And that's the mental process that I want you to go through when you're doing your homework problems tonight. The first thing you ask yourself is, what will my answer be, positive or negative? And write the sign right there in your answer. Okay? If it's going to be negative, put it in your answer before you multiply it. All right, now in example 2, we're evaluating variable expressions. This is nothing new for you. You've been substituting the variable with a given value all year long. Okay, so value for the variable you've been doing all year long, except now you're doing it with a negative number. So you have negative 3 raised to the second power. Now, is this negative 3 times 2? Or is it negative 3 times negative 3? Anytime a number is raised to a power, that it's going to be that number times itself. So here's how you know if your answer is positive or negative. Is your exponent even or odd? Even. It's even, so your answer is positive. If you have an odd exponent, then your answer is negative. So negative 3 squared would be what? 9. What about negative 3 to the third power? What would that be?
It's odd, so it's going to be negative.
Negative what?
27.
Negative 27, because I'm raising a negative number to an odd power, so my answer will be negative. Okay, so anytime you're evaluating, and you do have a section like this on your homework, anytime you're evaluating, if it's an odd exponent and it's a negative base, then your answer is going to be negative. All right, now on example B, does anybody have a question about that? Any questions about even and odd exponents? All right, now in example B, now we're substituting all of our values for the variable. All right? Class, what's the first question I ask when I'm solving this?
How many negatives do
Okay, how many negatives do I have here? One. So is my answer positive or negative?
Negative.
So write that negative right there in your answer. Before you even multiply, write it in your answer. Now that you know what sign your answer is going to be, now you can just go back and multiply the numbers. You don't even have to worry about what's positive and what's negative. So 2 times 4 is 8, and 8 times 6 is 48. So your answer is negative 48. Okay? Now, if you're multiplying like 5 or 6 numbers together, it can get confusing when you're multiplying a positive times a negative. So the easiest way to solve it, and you never get the answer or the sign wrong, is to count how many negatives and put that in your answer before you multiply. All right, so in example C, we're just substituting the value for the variable, and we're solving. So go ahead and do that one on your paper real quick. All right, Haley, what's the answer? Very good, because 9 times 2 equals 18. Just substituting a little bit of order of operations there. Okay? All right, any questions on example 2? Okay, now in example 3, now we're applying this concept to a word problem. And here's the word problem, okay? I'm on the bottom of page 273. You can read along with me. I'll kind of paraphrase it a little bit. It says, most of Greenland is covered with ice, and at certain points it's 2 miles thick. But scientists say that 3 feet of ice melt away each year. So they want to know how much ice melts away over 10 years. Well, in order to set this up, I need to know what integer is going to represent 3 feet of ice melting every year. And what integer would that be? It would be negative 3, because ice is melting, so that's negative. So I would represent that with a negative 3. And how could I figure out how many feet over 10 years? How could I do that? Maggie? Negative 3 times 10. Times 10 years, and what would I get for my answer? Alexis? Negative 30. And what's my label? Feet. Okay, that's about how much ice would melt over a period of 10 years. Okay? All right, and if you understand that, that's everything you need to know for 6.4.